Chapter 2 deals with council input and output. By the end of this chapter, you are going to know how to use console.write and WriteLine, or you'll learn more about them. You're going to combine data types in output using concatenation, and you'll also learn how to use string interpolation. You will be learning how to do formatted output, and this is for numbers with decimals. You will also learn to use escape sequences if you want to print out special characters. In addition, we will learn how to use some methods to read in data. So readline and read are two of those methods. And in addition to learning how to use those methods, you will learn how to convert the data into the correct data type, because read and read line read the data in as strings. Mastering the input and output lets you make your programs interactive. So after we are done with this chapter, we will be able to prompt the user for information, and they will be able to enter it, and we will be able to store it. So our output methods are used to display data and strings to the console. The two methods in C# that we are using are console.write and console.WriteLine. And the difference is that WriteLine has a carriage return at the end and write does not. Okay, so that is the difference. They're both part of the system namespace, and they are both in the console class. Quite often when we are writing to the console, we write out text, but we also want to write what our variables are storing. And in order to write text and variables in the same write or WriteLine statement, we either need to use concatenation or string interpolation. Concatenation involves using the addition operator between the different data types. So anytime the data type changes, we have to put the plus in there. And so I did create some examples here. We've got a couple strings. And then here I've got another string where I'm combining them. And then here I am writing them out. In the WriteLine, you can see I'm writing out a little string, and then I'm writing the contents of a variable, which is why I have the plus sign. And this one is a little bit different. I've got some numbers, I've got a result, and now I want a more scriptive statement written to the console. So I've got the variable first number, and that will put the 20 on the screen. But now I want to put the word plus in there. So I have to concatenate that, okay, because the number is an integer plus I've got in a little string. And then I want to display the contents of the next number. So I've got another concatenator in. And then I want to display the word equals followed by the contents of result. Okay. And so this last example, instead of spelling out plus and equals, I'm using the symbols instead, but the way you have to code it is the same. I'm still having to use the concatenators because this is a variable, the contents of a variable, and this is a string. So that is concatenation for output. Okay, and then here you can see an additional example where I've got text and then I am outputting the value that is being stored. This is how we had to code WriteLine up until a few versions of C# ago. It might have been .NET 5. String interpolation is kind of a new way of writing the contents of a variable and string to the console. And you start it with a $sign. And then you have an opening double quote at the very beginning and a closing double quote at the very end. And then in between, you put the text you want to display. And then when you want to display the contents of a variable, you use a curly brace and enter the name of the variable. And then you have a closing curly brace. So that is, to me, a little easier way of writing text with the content of a variable. So this is the same example that we looked at before, but now we are using string interpolation. So we don't have to have that plus sign in there. We don't have to remember to include opening and closing quotes. We just put the quotes around the whole thing. And especially when you get into something like this, you can see this is a huge time saver. We've got the $, the opening quote, the closing quote, and then we pretty much type it in as we want it displayed, and the variables just go in the curly braces. Okay, and same with this example. So string interpolation is nice, and it does save you time typing. And it cuts down on errors because you don't, with the other technique, a lot of people miss closing double quotes, and that does not happen as often with string interpolation. Special characters and escape characters. So if you wanted to do something like this, the harder I work, the luckier I get, and you wanted luckier to be in double quotes. Well, this is going to be a problem because the double quotes are used in a WriteLine to indicate the beginning and the end of your text. And so it's going to get super confused with this. So in order to put double quotes so that they will actually print out, you have to use what's called an escape sequence. And all an escape sequence is it's a slash in front of the character that you want to print out. Okay, and just by putting that slash in there, the C# compiler knows that this is something it needs to print out. And so it works with double quote. It also works with the single quote. If for some reason you wanted to actually print out a slash, you'd have to do a slash and a slash. Other useful escape sequences are /n, and that is a carriage return. And a /t is a tab. So here you can see I've got slash and the apostrophe. Okay, so you can see it printed with an apostrophe S. And I did the same thing here. And then I added a carriage return. As you can see, favorite color. And then there's a carriage return, so food is on the next line. And so here I've done that as well. I've got carriage returns. And you might think, well, what does that save you? Well, instead of doing a bunch of WriteLines, I only have to do one. And then I can do the /n. I can close off my double quote and concatenate it here with another string interpolation line. Concatenate it here with another string interpolation line. Okay, and so I don't have to key in the console.write line, put the parentheses in, put the semicolon in. It basically saves you time. Formatted output. So if you're printing out a double value and you want a little more user-friendly output, so you don't want a bunch of trailing decimal places, you can use formatted output. And there are a lot of formats that are built in, and they are part of the format method, which is in the string class. So inside your write line, if you're just going to print out a value like this and you want it to print formatted with a nice $ and commas and 2 decimal places, it's string.format. And then you'll notice there's in the parentheses, we have an opening double quote, closing double quote. This is the format you're telling it to use. So it's currency. Right? And then a comma, and balance is the variable you want printed out. And so the default here is 2 decimal places. So if you do a 0:n for the format, okay, that is like a comma format with 2 decimal places. If you use the 0:f, that is going to give you a fixed format where you just basically it's kind of like no format. So I never use that one. If you want it to print out the zeros that are at the front, you can do 0:0, comma, 000.00. You can actually put the zeros in, representing where you want the zeros to print out. Okay. And so because this number was 125.46 and we have a 0 here, it printed out that leading 0. If you just want to note where the comma is and where the digits should be, but you do not want the zeros printing out, then you're going to use the hashtag or the pound symbol. Now, in addition to these formats, you can kind of make up your own if you want. So this one is basically 0:0. And so that is what you get. Here, we're being a little bit more specific as far as the formatting, and we want 3 decimals. So that is what you get. Here's a % format. And so that is what we get. You'll notice that we don't have any decimal point in there. So that is why we don't get a decimal in here. Okay, and so I do have several examples here showing you, they've even got a scientific format that's built in, what the output from that looks like. Okay, and how you might code something like this all in one line. You could do it like this. Or you could use the concatenator. Okay, so I could have made a write line here, put the plus sign in, and then done the second part of that. In fact, I'll show it to you. Always more than one way to do this. All right, so if I wanted to code this in a single write line, I could do this. And actually that should be indented. Okay, so I could do it like that, the little concatenator. Okay, that looks the same as the other example. And you might think, well, how would you do that with string interpolation? You'd still have to use a concatenator. The reason for that is because this is considered a completely different data type. So it's not, the string interpolation would not be able to understand that. So that you would have to concatenate in. And then if I wanted to put something after that, I could then once again do the interpolation. But this, because it is completely different, it's calling a method for the formatting. You know, you'd have to concatenate kind of before and after that. So those are our output methods, write and write line. For input methods, we have not looked at these yet. This is how we bring data in that the user types. And we can use console.readline or console.read. The problem is that with console.readline, which is what you're going to use most often, it's going to read an entire line of input and it's going to store it as a string. Okay, it will discard the enter mark at the end. Okay, but that is what readline does. Console.read reads in a single character, and it does not discard the enter mark at the end. So if you use readline and you're storing a string, perfect. You don't have to do anything special, right? This is going to read the entire line in as a string, so we can store it and we're good to go. Okay. And typically, if you're going to use a read line, you have a write line above it that prompts the user, what is your name? And then we read it in. Now, if you don't know that for sure that they're going to type something in, let me show you what this looks like. Perhaps that's not going to work. Oh, we'll try this. What is your name? All right. You'll notice that console.readline has a squiggle in here. And that is because we do not know what the user is going to type. They could just type enter, in which case nothing would be entered into name. So if that concerns you, I mean, your program will run fine with the little squiggle, but if you don't like it, you can make it nullable. So if you put a little question mark in after the data type, that means that, hey, I don't know if this is going to be filled in or not. And that allows them then to just press enter and not enter anything. Okay, so this is saying, yeah, I know they might not enter something. Okay, so adding the question mark makes it nullable. Is that required? It is good practice, but it is not required. Okay, your program will run without doing that. When we get into using frameworks, you are going to have to make things nullable, but in the console apps, you do not. So what happens if I want to enter a number? Then we have to convert it because readline is going to read it in as a string. If what you want is a number, then we have to convert the string into the correct format for the number. So if you're going to store it as an integer, then you have to use an integer conversion method. And there are two of them, int.parse or convert.toInt32. They do the same thing. I typically use parse because for me, the parse methods are easy to remember because they match my data type. So int.parse is for integer. Double.parse is for double. If I want to store it as a character, I can do char.parse. Okay, so, or bool.parse. So it makes total sense to me, easy to remember. Okay, but just want you to be aware that there is also a convert method. So you can use whichever one you want. toInt32 is integer, toDouble is for the double value. toBool or toBoolean is to convert to Boolean. And convert.toChar is for character. Okay, so super important that if the data is not going to be stored as a string, that you convert it. Otherwise, you will get an error, a runtime error. Okay, so here's a little program we can run. Okay, so we've got a movie name. You'll see I did not make it nullable, which is why we've got the little squiggle here. Again, if that bothers you, you just put the little question mark in, allowing it to be null. Okay, and then we've got movie name, which can just be read in as is because it's a string. We've got rating, which I'm using char.parse. We've got tickets, which is an integer, so I've got int.parse. And then we have double price, and I'm using double.parse. Okay, and then you can see I've got string interpolation down here for printing. This last one, I've got the string interpolation, but I am formatting the number. So I had to concatenate that in. Okay, and then I've got the value that's being printed out. So let's run it. Enter the name of the movie. Oh, let's see. What movie? We'll do Halloween. Ooh, what was that rated? R? How many tickets? The price. Oh, actually, they're expensive now. So you can kind of see how that works. We have not learned error handling yet. So if you run these and you put in the wrong type of data, it's not going to matter for the movie name because it's a string and it'll pretty much take anything. But if it's, and rating is probably not going to give you an error either, but this will. So if I do something like this and it's saying how many tickets, it is not going to like that because I should have entered a number. Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're testing these because there is a way to check for this, but I can't teach you everything at the same time. We will be covering how to handle this later in the semester. Okay, so there's also a couple other examples that you can look at. This second example uses the convert methods instead of the parse methods. And it's kind of personal preference which one you use. So read line is used for a string or more than one. Console.read is designed to read one character. And you'd think if it's designed to read a character that it returns a character, but actually it returns an integer. So it reads one, and it returns it as an integer. So typically, if you're using console.read and you want to see what character was entered, you have to convert it. Okay, so you can use character.parse or you can use convert.tochar, either one. When you read it in, that will convert it. Okay. Then there is an additional problem because the enter mark is remaining in the queue. And if you read in any data after this, it's going to read in the enter mark and be done. So that is a problem. And I can show you that here. So we had rating. So let's do a read on this instead of a read line. Oh, and that probably cannot be nullable. To string. I'm not trying to convert it to string. Maybe rated. Try this. Doesn't like it that I'm changing this. All right, it's taking that better. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. There is going to be a problem on the next line. What is the name of the movie? All right, so now it just kind of terminated. And the reason is that after it read in the rating, there was the enter mark that was still in the queue. So when it went here, it read the enter mark in as an integer. And it's like, whoa, this is not an integer. So what we have to do if you are using console.read is you've got to clear out the input queue. And so you can just do a console.read line here. That would get rid of anything else that was in the queue. Okay. Or you could just do a console.read that would get rid of the next character. So with the read line in there, let's go ahead and run this. And now it's working. Okay, and for some additional examples, you can take a look at the examples that I have in here. And again, you can copy and paste these and run them yourself.